Story 1. The church. Mitch, Bill, and I knew this church well. We all grew up going to it. Now, of course, we had all fallen away, so to speak. It is not a hard church to get into. The second floor windows were never locked, and there was no one in the neighborhood ignorant of how to get on the roof. We, however, were the only ones who knew of out the windows, the only ones who would sneak in and hang out. This time, however, we decided to bring a 30-pack of beer and get drunk in it. Bill carried the beer downstairs and set it down on one of the 3 large steps at the front of the stage. The auditorium did not fall into the standard of what people would imagine, where seats were permanently mounted to an inclined base. The floor was flat and carpeted, folded chairs stacked neatly against the wall. If you were facing the stage, you could feel light filtering in at your right. That entire wall was windows save for a double door, which marked the mouth of a hallway in the corner of the room. They opened to show a serving counter from the kitchen. The main door was down the hall. As Bill tossed me a brew, I decided to see what the church fridge had to offer. Down the hall I walked to the main kitchen door, releasing the musical crack and hiss of the beer in my hand. The kitchen was noticeably darker than the rest of the church. It was still plenty bright, enough for me to see, although that may also be attributable to the fact that I already knew the kitchen. Someone who had not been there before might not have been able to get around so easily. I found the fridge quickly, and it only took half a second to recognize that it was empty. The freezer, however, had a carton of ice cream ready full. Rating with a beer in one hand, I grabbed 3 spoons and laced them in my fingers as my free hand grasped the loot. Look what I found. Energy filled my voice. The pre-buzz excitement, Washington, exacerbated by the fact that we were drinking in a church that we had broken into. Bill and Mitch returned in college frat fashion, their energy obviously matching mine. The night continued. Poor piano playing, jokes in poor taste, and contests to see who could do the best tricks with a wheelchair. This joy turned to intense caution when we heard a noise from the hallway near the kitchen. All of us looked first to the wall of windows to make sure nobody was looking inside. I think someone is unlocking the door, I whispered. Further down the hallway, past kitchen door, Washington, a door to the parking lot. The 3 of us moved quickly to the hallway and looked down to see if a shadow was pushing into the hallway at the other end. No silhouette. Just the clean cut of light laying on the floor by the exit. Bill began to walk forward, wanting to get a closer look and make sure. I am going to go check the other door, I declared. There was a hallway on the other side of the stage that mirrored the hallway with the kitchen. I ran down and stared out through the glass of the other exit door. The parking lot remained well lit and empty. It felt like an eternity, but in truth I only observed for about a minute. Turning to rejoin my friends by the kitchen, the church suddenly carried an eerie look about it. It was no longer familiar. Every shadow seemed darker than before, full of danger, and though I did not see anyone outside, the distinct feeling that somebody was there now overloaded my mind. I ran quickly but quietly, arriving at the mouth of the H, all by the double doors, slightly out of breath. Nobody there, I reported quietly. That was what my eyes had told me, but the odd feeling I had on the way back had generated doubt in my sense of vision. Bill was still watching out the exit door at the end of the hall, while Mitch stood just past the door to the kitchen. The noise came again. This time it came from the kitchen, and again it sounded like somebody had come through a door. Of course, that made no sense. There are 3 doors to the kitchen. The double doors leading out to the auditorium, which had a counter you had to climb over, the hallway door, and the door leading outside. I was standing near the double doors at the mouth of the hall, Mitch by the main door halfway down the hall. The 3rd door could be seen by Bill as he watched out the exit door at the end of the hall. Now it was not a fear of people or being caught. It was a curiosity of what was getting us so rattled. Mitch turned and leaned in to the kitchen. As Bill stood and walked over to him, I opened up the double doors in the auditorium. I leaned over the serving counter, scanning the kitchen. All was quiet, not a thing out of place, and quiet and terrifying. Our curiosity was the driver now, though. We had to see what it was that generated this fear. Mitch walked into the kitchen and stood at its center. Bill followed him in, but only a few steps. He stood still, holding the door, obviously ready to turn and flee. The 3 of us scanned the kitchen over and over again. We looked for odd shapes, out-of-place shadows, but failed to find anything unusual. With each search, we gained back some level of comfort, but never enough to let us relax our shoulders or blink. Mitch turned with a smile and began to let out an uncomfortable chuckle. He was suddenly interrupted by the sound of smashing pots, pans, and other metal kitchen objects. We all jerked our heads over to the sink at my right. It was clean and undisturbed. The smashing continued, and I turned my head over to the opposite side of the kitchen. In my quick and frantic scan, I did not see anything out of place. The counters were untouched and cupboards closed. The source of our vociferous kitchen band remained hidden. By the time my head was fully turned, I had seen Bill's last step through the door and Mitch on his way out with matched fear. I pushed myself back off the counter and fell over my own feet, frantically twisting to begin my run. My strides projected a demonstration of terror across the auditorium and down the other hall, because there was no way in hell I would pick the closer door. I had to run alongside the kitchen to get to it, and after I got out I would still have to run past the outside kitchen door. Bill and Mitch had the same thoughts, choosing their escape route too. It seemed like I wasn't making space. Wherever this loud crashing came from, it got more intense as I ran. Where others would scream poetic profanity, I breathed heavy and pumped my arms with the powerful cadence of my feet. Louder and louder the evil symphony got. Bill hit the exit door hard without slowing down. Now the smashing was happening right next to my ears. I could have sworn people were hitting pots, pans, and spoons together just on my shoulder. Then Mitch made it through the door with equal enthusiasm. Bill's exit, I saw the door swing wide and hard, hitting the outside wall, but I could not hear it. The nose of the kitchen was pulling ahead. Something I could not see was closing around me. My ears were so abused that my eyes began to hurt. I have to get out. I cannot slow. If that door swung back around, I would break it off the hinges. This crashing turbulence was tangible, surrounding me and tearing my ears apart until my shoulder drove through the door. The pots and pans stopped abruptly, replaced with a wicked and malicious laugh. I continued my pace, focused on staying with my friends, the laugh faded, and the presence that had almost surrounded me was not in pursuit. Once outside, we of course did not stop. Who would? The three of us were both in good shape, but this run would impress an Olympian. Once we got away from the church, the road was dark. All of us continued until the next well-lit street. Dill stopped directly under a street lamp, hands pushed down onto his knees as Mitch and I joined him. Our collective attention stared up the dark street we had come from, watching, yes, but most of all listening. Heavy breathing was all that filled the darkness. What the fuck was that? Mitch said, keeping his voice low. Bill and I did not answer. Story 2. The NY subway deaths. One of my friends is a paramedic in New York. Don't ask me why, but it was always his dream to become one. And New York being the big and wild city that it is, he has of course seen some crazy things. He doesn't talk about his experiences much since they are always very personal and often disturbing. But I know that he has encountered his fair share of gruesome stabbings and gunshots. For example, he told us how one time some kids were playing with a shotgun, and one of them got his jaw blown and off. The boy was still alive as my friend rushed him to the and eventually lived. But he is horribly disfigured now, and has to eat through a tube for the rest of his life. There were other scare things. He told us once how he responded to a call where an elderly woman managed to decapitate herself at home alone. They found her body sitting in a chair in front of the TV, which was still on, and her head was laying on its side in the middle of the floor beside a puddle of blood. Her door was locked and all the windows were closed. All they know is that her neighbors heard a loud thud in her apartment and called the police when she didn't answer her door, but no one has figured out exactly how it happened. Yet by far the strangest, creepiest story that he ever told us is the one about the mysterious subway deaths that happened several years ago. A few of my other friends and I were hanging out at his apartment one time, drinking and listening to music. When the topic of ghosts came up, we started by talking playfully about ghost experiences we had as children. Just shadows in the corner of the eye, feelings of being watched, and stuff like that. But then my friend spoke up and said in a very serious voice that he wanted to tell us a story that he swore to God actually happened and freaked him out so much that it sometimes kept him awake, and when he rode the subway late at night, almost gave him panic attacks. We all became serious as he told us the following story, which I will now tell you. So my friend said a couple of years ago that the ambulance crews started getting calls about once every week about people found dead on the subway. The deaths always happened between a few particular stations. He said the names, but I can't all them exactly. The NY subway system is huge and always happened late at night when the cars were almost deserted. In fact, the victims were always found alone in the subway cars, sitting or lying on the benches, and there were never any witnesses. Another detail is that all the victims were males and died of heart attacks, sometimes even when they were unusually young. After the calls had been coming in steady for a couple of months, the story started to get some minor attention. The police checked footage from the cameras in the stations, but never saw anyone get on or off the trains regularly. It made them think that a particular person was causing the heart attacks with drugs or a stun gun or by some other means. There was no explanation. It seemed that some unlucky guy would be riding a subway car. Everyone else would happen to get off. And then sometime when he was alone in the car between stations, he would simply have a massive heart attack and die. The newspaper even ran a small insert about the case in the back reaches of the police blotter. Perhaps you even saw it, asking for information. Yet nothing came of it. But eventually my friend was lucky or unlucky enough to get a clue about what might have been going on. He was on duty one night when his crew responded to a call about one of the heart attacks. But this time the person managed to survive. They picked him up from the platform of one of the stations, where he was lying on the ground with a jacket from a Good Samaritan who called 911 under his head. The person who placed the call was still there and said that when he entered the car, he saw the man sitting slumped over on one of the benches and gasping for breath. Then called 911, and the man indicated that he needed help. My friend assisted in strapping the guy, who was about 40 or so, into a stretcher. Tan was with him in the back of the ambulance. As they went to the emergency room, the man Washington was well enough to talk, and my friend listened to him while he did whatever medical things one does in such a situation. Soon he realized that something abnormal was going on in the subway, something that still disturbs him to this day. The man said that he was on his way home from an exhausting shift at work late at night as usual. There were just a few people in the car when he boarded, and he was very tired and started nodding off as he sat in the car. He said he remembered at one point in between naps that the car became deserted except for him. Then he suddenly awoke to find himself paralyzed. He could see in front of him what was going on, but couldn't move anything, not even blink. He tried to yell, to moan, to do something, but the only result of his inward efforts was silence. He said that he had experienced sleep paralysis before, usually at home, but it was what happened next that almost killed him. As he was sitting there paralyzed, the train rolling between stations, he saw a little girl walking towards him. She was neither happy nor sad, he said, just an average little girl like you would see walking down the street. But she was transparent, as if he were watching a reflection in a window. He began to feel extremely anxious as she came nearer, but still couldn't move. She did not look at his eyes, but he said that she looked at him as if she knew him. She acted like it as well. She climbed up into his lap and curled herself into a ball as if to sleep, just the way you often see little girls do with their parents when they are tired. At that moment, he said, his heart attack started. The little girl was cold and motionless as she sat in his lap, and he said the cold from her crept over his whole body until it began to feel like someone was squeezing the middle of his chest. He started to lose his breath, but there was nothing he could do. The little girl just sat there in his lap, filling him up cold. Suddenly the subway arrived at the next station, and the little girl dissolved the man's words from his lap just before he heard the door open. That's when the Good Samaritan who made the call came up to him. He said, my friend related that the man survived the incident and recovered fully. The calls about heart attacks continued to come in for another month or so, then mysteriously stopped just as quickly as they had started. No conventional explanation was ever found that could fully explain the incident. My friend offered a couple theories of his own as to what might have happened. First, he said that sleep paralysis is fairly common and often is accompanied by vivid dreams and hallucinations, which could explain what the man saw, yet it does not explain the wave of heart attacks all occurring to males alone on the subway, all between roughly the same stations. Unfortunately, for the sake of finding the truth, the lucky man was, at least to my friend's knowledge, the only one to survive, and consequently there are no other stories to corroborate his. The other theory is that there really was a ghost of a little girl who caused the heart attacks on the subway. Like any big city, New York has a lot of domestic crime and many broken families. My friend speculated that she was a girl who was perhaps killed by one of her parents, or who maybe died and she somehow wandered into the subway tunnels after running away from home and spent the time after her death searching for her father. Of course, no one knows for sure. After my friend finished speaking, we all sat there silently, staring at the ground. Some upbeat song played in the background from the stereo, but the mood was dead by now, and stayed that way until my friend and I went home. When we did, I don't think a single one of us took the subway that evening. Story 3. The Lost Chord. Cora ran home from school that day with a knapsack full of half-nibbled biscuits and more questions than her mother had answers. It had started with a music lesson. She took piano from Mrs. Morris twice weekly and once on Sundays after church. Old Lady Morris was Ivan to flights of fancy and known to tell tales, but this topped them all. The young girl straightened her uniform before sitting at the kitchen table and plopping down her shoe. "Bag, Mrs. Morris," she said breathlessly as her mother approached with an unsure eye, "has told me something amazing." "Is that so?" was Mother's disinterested reply. She opened up the strings of the knapsack and examined the barely touched tin of biscuits with dismay. "Why haven't you eaten?" "I thought these were your favorite." "Couldn't," Cora said. Her blue eyes began dramatic. "Just couldn't concentrate on anything else today." "Oh, do you have time? Let me tell you, or maybe you've heard, please." Mother was bemused at the child's impatience. Yourself." Cora, she took a seat across from her daughter. "What story did Mrs. Morris tell you? It's a fantastic mystery." The girl could hardly contain herself, but her stomach growled as if to ask, with Mother's voice in her head, "People are hungry all over, you know." And so she bit her lip and resigned herself to eat at least one biscuit before beginning. Once finished, she started. "It's had a kingdom, a big, grand kingdom, like the ones from the storybooks." Mother read one each night before returning it to the well-worn cupboard and sending her off to dreamland. Not knowing how Cora's brain raced 1,000 kilometers an hour before she could even consider sleep. With this it would be the same. The woman smiled and playfully entertained her daughter's enthusiastic retelling. This king, Dom, had everything, really, I mean, a prince and a princess and all of that, and there were many people in it. Mother smiled. "I'd imagine so, but then one day—" "Well?" Cora screwed her face up into a frown. "I'm not sure. I think it was a girl that did it." "A young girl?" "Yes, that's what Mrs. Morris said. A little girl like me, and what did she do, even?" Mother was intrigued now. She didn't mean to, but she made the entire kingdom vanish. Just like that, the girl waved her hands emphatically, as though on stage making a rabbit disappear. It was the chord, the lost chord, and if you find it, and you play it, you see, on the piano, then it would bring the kingdom back. Mother leaned back onto her elbows, a bit impressed. The old bird still had some new ones in her yet. She'd never heard of that story. I didn't know, she told Cora slowly. But this didn't quiet the girl's mind at all. No, it only served to feed it more ideas that bounced around like whirling dervishes in her mind. You haven't heard of this kingdom? No, not at all, I'm afraid. Mother replied with a smile, and anyway it sounds like a fairy tale, or maybe an instruction for you to practice your chords more. Why, yes, that was it. If anyone could bring the kingdom back in all of England, Cora knew she could, and she would fen. The chord, she'd just have to, and she wouldn't rest until she did, and maybe the kingdom would welcome her, sit her down on a gilded throne, and celebrate her. Maybe it was like the kingdom of heaven where F. Etter was, and all the people in it were happy, like the angels that flew on high in the hymns every Sunday. So Cora considered all the possibilities, and then her work began. She needed more information from Mrs. Morris, but, alas, there was little to be had. It was much the same with Mother. She hadn't even heard of the kingdom. Were they here before the war? Cora wanted to know. Mrs. Morris only shrugged her slight, bony shoulders in relative indifference, and instructed her back to her melodies. But still the girl's interrogations continued. Not here before were World War II, the one that claimed Father and most of Uncle Paul's bad arm. No. Then perhaps before the First War, then the one Granddad fought. She played her heart out at school. She played even more frenetically the keys at home, but still she persisted in wondering the grand scale and time period of this assuredly glorious kingdom. Surely they were here in the time of the Renaissance of knights of old and fair maidens, but still no. Mrs. Morris insisted, and sit up straight, young lady, and not one other soul seemed to have heard of it. No kingdom like that had ever disappeared. Read, in fact, at least according to every last history book Cora could find in the children's library or even the adults' library. No vanishing kingdoms. Not in Cora's 11 years now, nearly 12, nor her mother's 34. Not even her great-non's 92, or all of them combined. Her mind raced with endless numbers, endless possibilities. A kingdom before time was even recorded, she thought, and all that was needed. Was this very special, very unknown lost chord to the little old piano in the parlor then? Days turned to weeks as Cora dutifully recorded every possible permutation of those old little keys, and in turn crossed out each one with a big X of her felt pen and a disappointed sigh. Mrs. Morris kept on in her steadfast refusal to dole out more insight. Could it be a one-handed C chord, or would she need to use both, and how many notes? 3, 4, 5, 6 even. Cora was splendid in maths, and that meant that the possibilities could now be in the thousands, but the work was slow, and she was quick to finish it. Even Mother found herself surprised at the constant clinks and jangles of the piano echoing out of the small parlor room each day when she went to the kitchen to put on the soup or dust the fine china. Cora played until her fingers ached. Then she would take a break, only to scribble down more groupings of notes, more possible solutions, the sides of her hands blackened with ink, the pads of her fingers calloused over, and still she played. Cora was tired, but her mind simply would not rest. She was on to lower notes, no W. Any higher chords had been proven false, and she wanted to see the kingdom. She needed to. It was a Saturday, and afternoon light streamed between the heavy plush curtains, but it would not beckon her out to play the royal family, surely. Missed the sun, the world outside. She brought her buckled shoes down to the dusty bronze pedals. Only now had she thought to start using those. Perhaps that was the secret to the lost chord. After all, the girl brushed her hair aside and began to play chord after chord, depressing the pedal with a slow, methodic thunk every time she did so. The sun grew higher in the sky. Her fingers stretched to reach the keys. 5 in total. She pressed them down firmly, and the pedal as well. All at once there was a shaking of the floor beneath her feet. She had done it. At last, suddenly the parlor, then the whole house, the whole neighborhood, in fact, was bathed in blinding light. Mother was folding laundry in the upstairs and dropped to the carpet, fearing a bomb. Yet it was something worse, something she could never in all her life have imagined. Cora was knocked to the floor by the shaking, but quickly scrambled to her feet. The foretold kingdom had returned, and its awful sight gripped her child's heart. Something terrible had come to Marcy Street, and only now, as her mouth fell open, did Cora realize the one thing she had failed to consider all her weeks at the little piano. Once it had vanished. Where had the kingdom been? For how long, and its citizens gone, was any pretense of a fairy tale of beautiful nobles cloaked in silk with beaming crowns to welcome her? Cora stumbled back to the doorway of the parlor, then back further, right up against the wall, jostling her mother's china cabinet, and not even noticing. She could no longer tell if the shrill cries in the air were from her own throat or those of the creatures that now came before her. They screamed without mouths, wept without eyes, and with a tangle of fused limbs and distorted claws shambled haltingly into the world. Story for the Night of the Glass Eyes. Jenny, short for Jennifer, is a feminine given name, a Cornish form of Guinevere. Guinevere adopted into the English language during the 20th century. It may mean white enchantress, or the fair one from Proto-Celtic window suburb. White phantom. I heard this story from my grandma when I was like 7 or something. She was already getting kind of weird and forgetful. Otherwise, I don't know why she'd tell this to a little kid. Well, my mom sent me to her house, which was only a couple blocks away from where we lived at the time. Nana could still move around and do basic household chores and stuff. But since Grandpa died, she'd kind of seen, lost, and not really with it. But a lot of times she was smiling and normal and glad to see me, so I liked going there most of the time, until she started talking about Jenny. Nana was looking out the windows one day when we were up in the attic cleaning. I'd been helping her go through old boxes for a few weeks since I was on summer vacation at the time. Sometimes it was really boring, just old mail and bills and newspapers, but sometimes we found old photographs of Nana's parents and grandparents, which were cool and super creepy. I found some journals Nana had writ. 10 as a kid, a really long time ago, like 70 years, back when she was my age. It was funny. Her handwriting at the time looked so much like mine, all sloppy and loopy and sloping down to the right side of the page. If it hadn't been so similar to mine, I probably wouldn't have been able to read it, but I knew how to translate the weird scrolls and scratches. So I started flipping through a diary. April 17th, 1927 was Nana's 7th birthday, and it seemed her Uncle Sam had given her the diary as a gift, so that was the first entry. About her birthday celebration, her mother baking a cake, her father coming home from work with a box tied with a string, her uncle coming over for dinner and giving her the diary, etc. Anyway, a few months of diary entries go by and they're petty boring. Little girl stuff like drawings of horses and complaining about her baby brother and getting a red ribbon at the county fair, blah, blah, blah. But then something strange started appearing in the entries. She started talking about a little girl named Jenny, and what she wrote about Jenny sounded really creepy. It seemed Jenny was the local apothecary's daughter and lived in town. Since I didn't know, I asked Nana what an apothecary is. She said it was the town pharmacy run by Mr. Tarrington. You'd go to him to get medicines and elixirs and stuff. Whatever elixirs are. There were rumors about him among the children in the town, that he put poison in some of the bottles or that he did experiments on people late at night in the basement of the apothecary. I guess he was nice to everyone, but he and Jenny kept to themselves a lot. Since there was no Mrs. Tarrington, Jenny was homeschooled and generally didn't come outside much. And when she was spotted, it was usually just a passing glimpse when Mr. Tarrington opened the back room door of the store to fill out prescriptions. The back room was where all the pills and syrups and heavy-duty medicines were kept. That's where Jenny seemed to spend all her time. Back then, nobody monitored that stuff. They'd give heroin to a child if they had a cough back then. So the story was Jenny was sick a.lot and needed to stay inside where she wouldn't get a chill or whatever. So Nana and none of the other children in town had actually ever met Jenny. They'd only seen glimpses of her, flashes of her cheap black hair and blue dress. They sometimes overheard their parents whisper things about the Tarringtons, rumors like that Mrs. Tarrington had had an affair and Jenny wasn't really Mr. T's child, but was the child of the devil, and that's why he kept Jenny away from everyone, or that Mrs. Tarrington had taken pills in the back of the store and killed herself, and that Jenny refused to leave her dead body, which was still back there to this day. I don't think anyone really thought that. Nana said small towns get their excitement from gossip based on nonsense, and that none of those rumors had any basis in reality, and that the townspeople couldn't have possibly guessed what the real story was, and that it was good they never knew what was the real story, that Jenny didn't have any eyes. Jenny had glass eyes. Both eyes were made of glass, but just the whites, no irises, no pupils. Jenny was blind. They found this out when Nana's friend Peter dared her to sneak into the back of the store and snip a lock of Jenny's hair. Nana was kind of a tomboy and wasn't about to let Peter tell everyone she was too scared to do it. So one night they snuck out and had tea into town. The last entry of the diary was that evening, with a now 8-year-old Nana writing about what she and Peter planned to do when everyone else was asleep. The rest of the journal was empty, so I asked Nana what had happened that night. "What happened with Jenny?" I asked Nana. "What did Jenny say?" She kind of stopped sorting through the trunk she'd been organizing and looked at me funny. Her eyes glazed over, and she turned her head toward the one window in the attic and looked out, not really seeing anything. I thought she'd gone to her other place, as my mom called it when Nana spaced out and got confused. But she hadn't. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strange. "It was the night of the glass eyes," Nana went on. "She spoke to us, Jenny. She wasn't asleep like we thought she'd be. She was sitting straight up on a little cot, facing the door as though she was expecting us. She told me things." Nana stopped talking then, so I asked her what things did Jenny tell you. Then she said, still in that clear, strange voice, she smiled at me, patted the cot for me to come sit next to her. I didn't want to, but I felt myself compelled to do it anyway. I sat next to Jenny, and I saw her white glass eyes, her long jet black hair. As she beckoned me, her hair swung a bit to the side, and I saw she was naked. When I sat next to her, Jenny began to stroke my hair. She kissed my cheek and nuzzled me like a horse would. She took my hand in hers, and then she told me about the end of the world. I asked Nana what she meant by that. She said how it was going to happen. Jenny giggled and whispered in my ear things I will not tell you, things that I locked away in my mind so I wouldn't know, and no one else would know. But these things are still locked away. Jenny kissed Peter on the lips, patted his head, and whispered into his ears too. But some of the things Jenny said have been escaping lately. My mind is unlocking them now, and they are getting out, and I know they were real. Whatever Jenny was, the things she said were real and are going to happen exactly as she said they were. I didn't want to know, but I also did want to know. I asked her what was she, remembering what Jenny said. She said time would rip, and we'd all see what the universe really was. We'd see past the curtain, and we'd see insanity, and we'd laugh and scream and tear out our own eyes just as she had. We'd see dimensions where triangles had 12 sides and to plus to equal nothing. She said so many more things that those things are still locked away, but they're going to escape too. I know they are, and when they do I'll tear out my own eyes too. She died in the dementia wing of a nursing home, eyes intact, and after that day in the attic she never mentioned Jenny again, but sometimes her eyes would glaze over, and she'd gaze out the window, and I'd wonder if another one of those locked-up things had escaped. Nana wouldn't tell me, so I had to look it up at the library archives. It took me a long time, but last year I found an item in the local paper from the summer of 1928. Turns out I found Peter in his bed the next day. After the night of the glass eyes, he was lying there, smiling, naked, and he'd cut out his own eyes. Story 5. My local Costco has a secret basement. My husband is dying, despite his good prognosis after the accident. He gets weaker every day. When he became unable to even say my name, I got desperate. I posted details of his condition on every form I call. Defined medical accident survivors. I even posted it on a sketchy deep web forum called Help Yourself. That's where I got the PM from Chris. I can help. Why? Ooh, I'll send instructions tomorrow morning. See, the next morning, I didn't get a PM. Instead, I got a letter, a real paper envelope, tucked into my empty mailbox. After getting over the initial terror, he somehow knows where I live. I greedily opened it and read the note inside. Dear Blair, here are the instructions. Be sure to follow them exactly, or they might find you. Then we'll have a real problem on our NDSC drive to the Costco and bring a photograph of your husband and something that is likely to have his DNA on it, like a toothbrush. Go to the refrigerated produce room in the back. You will see a red-haired woman standing there, pretending to sort through the lettuce. She will be wearing a red vest and a Costco badge. But don't be fooled. She is not an employee. Go up to her and ask, do you have organic blueberries? My son's allergic to the other kind as long as the produce section is empty. She will smile and lead you over to the blueberries. As she picks up a box and hands it to you, she will purposefully drop it. Oh no, she pretend it's an accident. Play along. Such a mess, blueberries all over the floor. She say, I'll stand out there and make sure no one comes, and while we wait for the janitor, no janitor is coming, of course. She will stand guard outside the produce room. Go to the right wall where the crate of mushrooms is. Push it back towards the wall. It will roll into a small alcove. Beneath it, you will see a rectangular hole cut into the floor and a ladder leading down. Climb down. My eyes flicked to the bottom, where he had scrawled in red marker, warning, read before proceeding. Don't just make a beeline for the produce section. They'll know what you're doing. Get a cart, fill it with some junk. You should blend in with the other shoppers as much as possible. For that same reason, don't wear bright colors or heavy makeup. If a short woman with an infant strapped to her chest asks you for help, kindly refuse. She is one of them. If you look closely, you will notice that the infant pressed face first into her chest is a doll. Don't talk to the man at the front of the store advertising flooring. He's not one of them. He's just rude. Don't buy any food from the cafe. I folded up the paper and jammed it into my pocket. I then rushed into the house, grabbed the items he requested, and jumped in my car. With a squeal of tires on the pavement, I was off. Asterisk. It had been nearly a decade since I last set foot in a Costco. Everything looked different, bigger, emptier. The shelves stretched up to the ceiling far above, a seasonal section of glittering Christmas trees and dancing Santas sat far below. I rolled my cart into one of the first aisles. Napkins and disposable dining ware stared back at me. I grabbed a huge stack of paper plates and dropped it into my cart. Thrying, the metal rattled. When I got to the end of the aisle, I turned left. Excuse me. I turned around. A pretty blonde woman stood behind me. Yeah. She flashed me a sweet smile. I don't want to bother you, but can you help me get that? She pointed to a jug of maple syrup on a high shelf. I can't reach it, and you're so tall. I stared at her, my heart beginning to pound. My eyes flicked down. Oceanless infant was strapped to her chest. No, I'm sorry. I'm in a hurry, but I quickened my pace. The cart rolled across the floor with newfound speed. I didn't slow until I de-rounded the corner. Then I grabbed a few more decoy items. Some corn muffins from the bakery, a bag of clementines, and arrived at the produce room. When I entered, there she was, the red-haired woman, sorting through the lettuce. I cleared my throat. Do you have organic blueberries, my son's? He can't eat them. I mean, he's allergic to the other kind. Fuck. She gave me a smile and walked over to the blueberries. They're right over here. She picked up one of the boxes. Splat. I watched her walk out. When she was firmly stationed at the entrance, I ran over to the crate of mushrooms and gave it a push. It rolled easily under my hands. With a final glance at the red-haired woman, I descended into the pit. The metal rungs were cold under my hands. They felt rough, as if cover. Ed and rust, the square of light above me shrunk until it was little more than a twinkling star in a black sky. Smack, my feet hit the hard floor. Drip, 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 the sound of water. From somewhere in the darkness, along with a soft, rustling sound, I pulled my phone out and turned on the flashlight. Before me was a tunnel, roughly hewn out of stone, like some strange hybrid between a basement and a cave. I walked forward. The floor was uneven, so I had to concentrate to keep my footing. The damp walls glistened in the white light. After a few minutes, I found a wooden door set into the stone. I pulled it open, revealing a dark, cavernous room. The smooth walls and rectangular shape looked like that of a traditional basement, but it had a rotten, swamp-like stench to it. In the center was a table. One leg was bent and broken. There was a sheet of paper in the middle. Leave the items here. We'll take care of the rest. CIPU. Led the toothbrush and photo out of my pocket and placed them on the table. I looked around the room, but as far as I could tell, it was empty. The closest thing to a person was a heap of clothes. In the back corner, my heart filled with doubt, but I tried to focus on Dan and the happy life we deserved as I exited the basement. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Dan came home from the hospital 2 days later. That first HT home, we sat on the couch in front of the TV, eating ice cream, like nothing had happened. Guess I'm living on borrowed time, Dan said, through a mouthful of cookies and cream. Better make it count, by eating tons of ice cream, by leading a good life. Oh, he smiled at me. I reached out for his hand, squeezed it, and smiled CK. But our smiles quickly faded when the news came on. The newscaster was standing outside of the Costco. Dozens of police cars were parked around it, their red and blue lights cutting through the night. Tonight, police found the evidence of violent cult activity at the Costco. She began. I jabbed nervously at my ice cream. Human remains belonging to dozens of individuals were found in the basement. A range from a few days to a few years old. Police believe some match the missing locals, but we're waiting on forensics to answer. The most recent one, however, has already been identified. It belongs to 24-year-old Carly Bessinger. A photograph flashed up on the screen. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a warm smile. It was her, the blonde woman who asked me to reach something on the shelf. Security footage shows her walking around the store 2 days ago, alive and well, until she entered the produce section. The reporter's voice faded. I wasn't listening anymore. Chris lied. There was no them. No woman with a doll strapped to her chest, waiting to pounce on me. No evil entity watching, thinking, plotting. He just didn't want me talking to a witness, a victim, a sacrifice. I looked over at Dan. He watched, oblivious. A generic look of concern spread over his features. I looked down the floor, unable to watch anymore. Don's not living on borrowed time. He's living on stolen time. Story 6. I don't think my friend ran away. I'd been depressed for a long time, mostly since my dad died. All his friends called him a hero. He was a cop and age. He sacrificed himself to save the lives of 23 people being held by an active shooter. I was 9 when that happened. I remember it like it was yesterday. But yesterday was my 17th birthday, and now my life is a nightmare. My mom eventually remarried, but I can't blame her for that. She was lonely and needed help raising a troubled kid. I just wish she'd been more aware of whom she was bringing into our lives. He's not why I'm in trouble, but he's an asshole who treats my mom like shit. She's too in love with him to see it. No, he's not the reason I ended up here, but he's a precipitating factor. It started when I heard that my friend Cassie had run away. I didn't get it. Cassie lived in a suburban wonderland. Her parents were still married. They doted on her. Her siblings weren't douchebags, and she got really good grades. I mean, not straight A's, but good enough that she was on the honor roll and her folks were proud of her. Idyllic is the word I'd use. I spoke to her parents a time or two. They wanted to know the first time if Cassie had said anything to me. She hadn't, and I'd said as much the second time I went over to be, I don't know, supportive in their tough time. I knocked on their door and Mrs. Demon answered. Oh, Julie, is everything okay? I said it was. Hey, Mrs. Beeman, I just thought I'd come over to say hi and see if you guys had heard anything regarding Cassie. I'm sorry if it seems insensitive. Cassie's mom opened the door wide and smiled a little. Oh, no, honey, please come in. I know you probably miss her as much as we do. I did. Cassie had been one of my best friends. Maybe 5 years ago, we'd grown apart a little after my dad died. I guess that's my fault. I withdrew from EV. Orion, I said as much to Mrs. Beeman, and her eyes welled up with tears. Julie, we don't know where Cassie is, but we got a letter shortly after she went missing. It shocked me a little. Missing, I thought she was just a runaway. I don't understand. Mrs. Beeman opened a binder that sat on her coffee table and pushed it toward me where I sat next to her on the couch. I read it aloud. Dad, I'm with Greg. I'm not in danger. I just needed to get out of this dead-end town and see the rest of the world. I'm sorry if this disappoints you, but I need this. Love, Cassie. Cassie's mom closed the binder, sniffed back tears, and said, we got this maybe a week after she disappeared. It's what convinced the police that she was a runaway. I looked at her face, and I could tell that she was less than convinced of her own words. I couldn't help myself. Who the fuck is Greg? Mrs. Beeman flinched at my language, and I apologized. Sorry, I just don't understand any of this. I never knew any Greg. I mean, I know Cassie and I aren't the best of friends anymore. but I never heard of her seeing anyone. A small smile touched her lips. It's all right, dear Richard. Mr. Beeman said the same thing when he read the letter. I'd never heard Mr. Beeman swear in the 10 years that Cassie and I had been best friends. Was Cassie depressed at all? Mrs. Beeman frowned a bit and started to shake her head, then stopped. I won't lie to you, Julie. I feel like I don't know who my own daughter was. If she was depressed, I didn't know it. I spoke with her a little while longer and thanked her for her time and the memories. I should have gone home, but I didn't want to deal with Todd by myself. I called my mom at work and told her I was going to go to the library and do my homework before I went home. She said she'd see me when she got off work. I hate lying to my mom, but I wasn't about to tell her that I was going to find a nice quiet spot in the woods and smoke some weed. I did just that. After the emotional drain of the Beeman house, I just needed to not give a shit for a little while. I found my spot in the woods and pulled my stash out from under the stump. I hid it there ever since Todd busted me smoking in my old playhouse in the backyard. Dick, I wasn't too far from home, and I wasn't exactly lying, because if my mom or Todd ever pinged my location on my cell, it'd put me within 100 meters of the library. I took a few hits and leaned back against the stump, closed my eyes, and just listened to the trees. It was dead quiet, but it shouldn't have been. No birds, no critters, or even insect noises. Nothing. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up from the wrongness of it. I was about to open my eyes when I heard a snapping noise, like someone or something had stepped on a branch. I should have gotten the hell out of there, but it was like my brain reverted to childhood. You know, if I can't see it, it can't see me. I heard more muffled noises until they stopped just behind me and to the left. The shifting of fabric as if someone were sitting or squatting near me. A deep, almost melodic voice came to me. I'd say I heard it, but that's not quite right. I mean, I did hear it, but it was inside my head. Keeping your eyes closed is probably a good idea. Kid, I felt a hand take the pipe from me. I heard a lighter spark and the sound of someone inhaling as the voice spoke again. Not bad. Before you dismiss this, no, and not a hallucination. I opened my mouth to speak and the voice shushed me. My mouth clamped shut, but not of my own accord. This is just a warning to you. Julie, please stop asking questions about Kaz. SIE. Let the Beemans be. They're in enough pain as it is, don't you think? I nodded, trying to think for myself. I felt a sharp poke somewhere behind my eye, and the voice said yes. I am who the letter referred to as Craig. Cassie is with me, and it's going to stay that was for as long as I like. I felt tears squeeze themselves out from under my eyelids. I felt a pipe placed back into my hand, and the barest of a breeze blown from the direction of my tormentor. No, not a breeze. It was his breath. It was fetid, rotten, with just a touch of musk from the weed. I would hate to have to talk with you again, Julie. You're not exactly my type, but I'll make an exception if I need to. Unbidden images flashed through my mind. Tall, pretty, willowy girls like Cassie T. Hair faces bordered in the black and white of missing posters. So many of them. I shuddered and shook my head emphatically. He spoke again. Good. I see we understand each other perfectly. I hope there's not a next time, Julie. I stayed there, shaking. I squeezed shut for how long, I don't know. I started to hear the sounds of nature again. Birdsong, the buzzing of insects. I screamed when my phone rang. My eyes flew open, and at first I was surprised to see it was dark. I saw my mom's number on the screen and answered. Julie Marie Townsend, I've been texting you for an hour. I'm in the library parking lot. Get your ass out here and let's go home. Dinner is getting cold. I took in a shuddering breath and told her I would be out in a minute. I stashed my pay and made my way to her car. She chewed my ass the whole way home about not answering her, and all I could do was apologize. I'm writing this down, so I remember it. I hope he can't dig into my here, and see that I am. If he does, I may be the next runaway. Story 7. The Underpass. Leo had mixed feelings about moving to the other side of the motorway. On the one hand, the new house was closer to where his friends lived, at least closer than he had been when he was in Cowton Ridge. He was also closer to the school, even though he was now on the opposite side of the road. However, the walk there and back would take just as long. When it came to the walk to and from school, he had two choices. Either go through the Knightsmount underpass, up to Park Bray, or through the woods on his side of the motorway and across the Woodlands Bridge. On the morning after his first night in the new house, Leo decided that the underpass would be the quick morning option and the bridge the scenic afternoon option. It was the middle of September, fast fading autumn. Leo crossed the main Ecclesbourne Road and walked towards the Knightsmount underpass. The road was a cul-de-sac. It ended suddenly and did not seem to have much purpose. It was as if they had wanted the road to go on and had meant to build houses at either side. As it was, on either side of Leo were plantations of bone-thin pine trees, and on the right side they gave way to real woods. Those woods he would walk home through. A tarmac path brought him within the early morning roar of the motorway and the north side of the Knightsmount underpass. He had not been through the underpass in a while, mainly because he had had no reason to cross to the outskirts of the town. As he approached the tunnel, memories of this place came back to him when he was a child walking the dog in the woods by the motorway with his father and brothers. Leo had never liked going through the underpass. Standing at the north end now, he remembered how slow and uncertain the walk through that long, dark place had seemed. He would stay close to his father, too old to hold his hand, but too frightened and too apprehensive to stray very far. His brothers would deepen their voices and send eerie echoes along that open-ended concrete casket, putting on a sinister show for him. He had to that's the dog's lead, and close his eyes and walk, sightless, as fast as he could out of that place. He stood just looking into the underpass, which had a distant but reassuring square of light at the other end. He could laugh at his childish terror, but it was an unsettling place he walked. The sickly orange lights which used to cast a fuzzy glow through the tunnel were long gone. It was dark from opening to opening, and because of its length, the very center of the underpass was a few degrees away from pitch black. The floor was gnarled tarmac with suspicious stains. The walls were gray concrete with large, square indents in some brutal pattern which must have been fresh and modern in 1968. As he neared the center of the tunnel, a fragmented memory came back to him, the memory of a feeling. He remembered exactly why he did not like that place. It was clear now. When he was 5 or 6, he could not understand that sense. But as he stopped in the dead center of the underpass, he recognized that sickly, uncertain feeling that he was being watched. No, not watched, stared at close quarters. There was no one in front of him. He wheeled round. No one behind. Everything was dark, musty, and unnatural. The sound of the traffic above was muted by layers of concrete. The cars made soft noises on the tarmac, like silk skimming over velvet. Leo thought, as he hurried out of the underpass, that he could hear another sound, like scratching. That night Leo had a dream. He could not remember it, only that it felt very real. He smelled petrol and oil and cigarette smoke. There was a pale man with greasy hair, looking at him as if he were looking down a microscope, and the man was listening. Listening very, very hard. There was some noise, but it was only scratching. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. For almost 2 weeks after this, Leo walked across the Woodlands Bridge. That was an altogether more pleasant experience, strolling across the gleaming white bridge and looking out over the motorway straight on its way to Glasgow. It was better than creeping underground. However, the bridge was not the fastest way home. This did not matter usually, but it did matter on that Friday night. Leo had been out with friends and had just said goodbye to the group. They lived close by, but on the other side from him he was lighter than air, content, and full of just enough drink. Nothing could scare him. Not even that bloody underpass. It was an unpleasant place, sure enough, but it was nothing to be scared of. Nothing evil. Dreams were bizarre things, anyway. It was an underpass going under the M.A. leading to from Anderton, gateway to sunny central Scotland. It was not Glamis with its monsters and secret rooms or Mary King's clothes with its immured, plague-ridden Edinburghers. It was shabby and dull and normal, like the town itself. He walked into the tunnel, those stains, that charming sectarian graffiti, those smashed bottles of tonic wine, such local color. Yes, the ghost tour companies over in Edinburgh should try this spot. Leo's thoughts danced, the tales they could tell, and here the guide would say, pointing a trembling finger, is the residue of Jakey Bill. No matter how much water and bleach the council uses trying to eradicate the stain, yes, they always reappear mysteriously the next day. Gasp. Leo laughed out loud, and the sound echoed back and forth through the underpass, muffled by the concrete. He was halfway through. He was all right, and then he was not. Leo's senses snapped to attention out of his half-cut glow. He stopped for no reason at all, like a wanderer in a strange place, and was in the dead center of the underpass. He could smell and taste the musty air of the tunnel. He wished that he could not. All alone, he sensed that vulnerable loneliness that we feel in a dark room when we wake in a strange bed. It was worse than that, though. At least then we remember why we are there in the dark after a minute. Leo did not know why he had stopped and why he waited, but the worst part of it all was the sound. The scratching noise came again, thin but insistent, from the west wall. He did not want to hear this, and he did not want to stay, but he had to. Something made him strainy. To hear the sound. He felt like some awful driver gazing at a crash on the road above. It was coming from a certain spot, right in the very center of the tunnel wall. Leo put out his hands and hot, cold, dry, brutal concrete His knees buckled. The sound was no longer a sound. He could feel the scratching, feel it as if it were inside his own skull. Then he heard the sound, the sone, and bearable, like someone screaming, shrieking with their mouth full of something. But now he could not move a single step forward or backward. There was no way out, no way out, a dead end. He felt as if his lungs were filling up, not with water, but something so heavy he could not breathe. A calm, hard voice said, "Let him scream. I want to hear him scream." Leo was on his back, and all he could hear was his own fast, deep breathing and the cars above. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 2 weeks later, as a car drove over the Knightsman T underpass, the tarmac split apart and a hole opened up. Luckily, the driver was relatively unharmed. However, the subsequent excavation and reinforcement work caused havoc on the M8 for weeks and weeks. It seems that the road had been weakened by a gap in the reinforced concrete down below. Those distant planners of 50 years ago were not always honest or good. We know that now. Some knew it back then. They pulled away part of the west wall of the underpass, the part in the dead center, and found the bones of a man, skull staring at them with blank eyes, and hands and feet shackled together. His hands were stretched like he was reaching out. The tips of his fingers had been inches away from the west wall. There were no marks of violence on the bones, no breaks, no fractures. He had most likely been alive when he was put in there. Apparently, 3 weeks later, they filled up the Knightsmount underpass with enough concrete to fill an Olympic swimming pool. Then they built a bridge